When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: I watched myself die. User: Para44L. Posted March 9th, 1999.
I never believed in second lives, but one afternoon, I watched myself die. It happened at an eye exam, of all places. I've been having these headaches that curled up behind my eyes and made everything feel too bright, like the world had a glare on it, so I finally went in to get checked out. The office smelled like antiseptic and old carpet, the kind that traps every scent from the past 20 years. Doc Rourke went through the usual motions, the lens flipping, the chart reading, the humming of the fluorescent lights overhead. He barely looked at me except to tell me when to blink. Nothing felt strange until he rolled over that bright light machine. I sat forward, chin on the rest, trying to keep my eyes open as the little adjustments clicked back and forth. The world felt narrow, small, predictable. The light flashed. The exam room vanished. I was lying on a cold, wet floor in a long hallway with cracked tiles and muddy water pooled around my arms. Red emergency lights flickered overhead, throwing everything into broken shadows. The air smelled like mildew and rust, and I was dying. I felt it, sharp, crushing pain deep in my ribs, like a fist had been driven straight through me. Someone down the hallway yelled my name with such panic it felt like the sound hit my bones. Before I could even place where I was, a gunshot tore through my side. My vision tilted, the ceiling spun, and I felt my pulse stagger and fade. Everything went black. Then I was upright again. Back in that damn exam chair, gripping the armrests like they were the only thing anchoring me to the room. Doc Rourke frowned, asking if I was all right, but his voice sounded like it came from the other side of a wall. I didn't answer. I pushed past him, stumbled out into the cold air, and leaned against my truck until my hands stopped shaking. I told myself it was a hallucination or a migraine or an anxiety thing. Something simple, something sane. But that night, when I finally closed my eyes, the entire scene replayed perfectly. Same hallway, same water dripping from those broken ceiling tiles, same terrible weight in my ribs, same voice shouting my name, and the worst part, the voice sounded familiar. Not exactly my own, but close. It felt like hearing myself a few years older, worn down by something I couldn't name. After a few days, the headaches got worse and the dreams got sharper. I'd wake up with my shirt damp with sweat, clutching my ribs even though there wasn't a mark there. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like remembering something I'd somehow forgotten. Everything snapped the day I saw the building. I was out on my lunch break, sitting at a red light, when I glanced to my right and froze. A long brick structure with broken windows, vines crawling through the frames, roof sagging like it was exhausted. I didn't know it, but something in my chest pulled tight. Through a cracked pane near the entrance, I saw the floor inside. Cracked tiles, muddy stains, the same warped hallway from the vision. I pulled over, stepped out, and walked toward it as if I didn't have a choice. My ribs throbbed in that familiar spot with every step I took. When I got close enough to see through the glass, the air in my lungs turned to stone. It was the hallway, my hallway, the one where I died. I came back the next day, and the day after that. Each time, the ache in my ribs grew more insistent, like something was trying to rise to the surface. On the fourth day, I brought a crowbar, even though I didn't admit to myself why. I found a side window with a loose frame, pried it open, and climbed inside. The air was cold and stale. My footsteps echoed against peeling paint and rusted fixtures. As I walked deeper, the hallway matched every detail from the memory, every crack, every stain, every bit of warped tile. Halfway down, the pressure in my ribs surged so suddenly I had to lean against the wall to stay upright. For a moment, the world doubled. I saw the real hallway and the dying one layered over each other, flickering like two channels fighting for the same frequency. A flashlight beam snapped me back. A man outside shouted that the building was condemned and I needed to get out before something collapsed on me. He didn't understand what I'd already seen collapse. I left without answering. I should have stopped going inside the building, but something had already followed me home. Objects shifted in my apartment. Keys moved, the chain lock undone overnight. Lights I knew I turned off glowing faintly in the morning. I'd hear faint footsteps in the hallway, even when I was sitting completely still. Once, when I woke in the middle of the night, I saw damp footprints on the carpet leading from the bathroom to the bedroom. Bare footprints, my size. Things escalated. I'd feel someone standing beside my bed, close enough to sense warmth, but not close enough to see. Sometimes a breath brushed the back of my neck. Once, drifting half asleep, I heard a whisper right next to my ear. "You weren't supposed to be here." It sounded like me, my voice, but scraped raw, older, hollowed out. The dreams changed again. Not memories now, but confrontations. Two versions of me, both dying, both reaching for something. In one dream, the older version, my voice from the hallway, stumbled toward me, blood on his shirt, eyes filled with a pleading desperation I can still feel in my bones. His hand reached out like he was trying to pull himself into me or pull me into him. I woke with a cold ache in my ribs that lingered until morning. The final sign came in the bathroom. I was shaving, staring at myself in the mirror under that pale yellow light when I noticed something wrong. A delay. My reflection moved with me, but not quite in sync. Just enough to make my breath catch. Then, slowly, deliberately, the reflection lifted its shirt, A bullet wound tore through its ribs, ragged and dark. I stumbled back hard enough to knock the soap dish to the floor, and when I leaned in again, the reflection looked normal. No wound, no delay, but my ribs ached in that old familiar way, like something inside me was remembering a death that hadn't happened here. I don't know which version of me is supposed to exist. I don't know how the fracture opened or why something crossed through it. I only know that something wearing my face wants the life I'm living. And every time I catch myself in a window or a dark TV screen, I see a flicker of someone watching from the other side, someone who remembers the moment he died, someone who thinks I stole his place. I'm writing this now because the reflection is getting bolder. He's matching me more perfectly each day. He's patient, he's determined, and he's hungry for the life that slipped away from him.
Subject: Cabin lights. User: Tango 60 Lima. Posted August 10th, 1995.
I've flown through storms bad enough to peel paint. I've landed in deserts lit only by tracer fire. I've carried men dying in the back of a helicopter, white-knuckled the stick while praying the engine kept turning. I thought I'd seen everything a cockpit could throw at me, but nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened on that night run, flying a half-empty commuter plane over the spine of the country. I took the job because it was quiet. Civilian flying after the military always feels like stepping down from a war into a prayer, a soft engine hum instead of rotor thump, civilians instead of soldiers, a checklist instead of a mission order. I wanted the boredom, craved it even. My nerves were shot, my sleep was broken, and flying short hops between small regional airports was the closest thing I'd found to peace. Up there, in the dark, I could almost forget the things I'd done and the things I'd seen. The route that night was nothing special. Depart before 11, a clear forecast, 10 passengers heading home after the holidays, a quiet sky stretching west. The airport lights dropped away as we climbed, and soon it was just blackness outside the windows, the kind of black that swallows every thought you don't tie down. I settled in, set the autopilot, and listened to the steady hum of the engines as the plane leveled at cruising altitude. For the first 30 minutes, everything was normal. A little turbulence, occasional chatter from ATC, the usual shifting of feet and rustling newspapers from the cabin. Routine, familiar. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a metal thermos and counted the minutes until landing. And then the cabin lights flickered. Just once, a quick pulse. Enough to make me glance over my shoulder, but not enough to register as a threat. Planes do that sometimes. Faulty wiring, a loose connection, no big deal, but then they flickered again. Longer this time, not a technical flicker, not a flutter caused by vibration. This was a pulse, almost rhythmic, like someone flipping the switch intentionally. I keyed the intercom, asked the flight attendant if everything was all right. No answer. I figured she might be busy with the cart, or maybe the intercom crackled out. I tried again, still nothing. That was when the first silhouette appeared. I saw it in the mirror above the cockpit door, the reflection that lets you keep an eye on the cabin without turning fully around. A shape stood near the last row. Tall, motionless, shoulder width wider than any of the passengers I'd seen board. I blinked hard, thinking I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks on me after too many night flights, and when I lifted my head again, it was gone. I told myself I'd imagined it. Shadows move strangely on night flights. Your mind fills in gaps. You get weird illusions in that glow from the overhead lights, but I still felt something. A shift in the air, like the weight on board had changed. When the lights flickered a third time, the silhouette returned. This time, it was closer, 3 rows from the cockpit door. I didn't see it move, it just appeared, as if the darkness had closed around it and opened again a few steps forward. No features, no face, just the outline of a person sitting perfectly still. Then, the lights steadied and the row was empty. I could feel my pulse in my jaw. My breath stayed shallow. The coffee tasted like rust in my mouth. I've stared down worse than shadows, but something about the stillness behind me pressed against my spine. I adjusted in the seat, pretending I wasn't unsettled, but every instinct sharpened to a point. I opened the cockpit door a crack and called down the aisle. Still, no answer from the flight attendant. She should have been visible. She should have been moving. She should have been doing anything but what I found when I finally unbuckled, pushed open the door, and stepped out. Her body was slumped in the jump seat. Head turned toward the wall, eyes half open as though she were listening to something only she could hear. Her chest rose shallowly, alive but far away, almost like she wasn't fully inside herself. I shook her shoulder gently, and she didn't stir. The plane shifted in mild turbulence, and I steadied myself on the overhead bin. When my eyes lifted, I saw something down the aisle that made the air catch in my throat. Another silhouette, sitting in a row that had been empty during boarding. This one smaller, shoulders narrower, maybe a woman, maybe a teenager. I could not tell. The lights flickered once, just enough for the figure's head to tilt toward me, and when the lights steadied again, the seat was empty. I backed slowly toward the cockpit, never turning around. In training, they tell you that humans react more viscerally to things seen in the periphery. When you look directly, your brain tries to reason. I didn't want to reason. I wanted instinct, and my instinct was screaming. Inside the cockpit again, I locked the door. My hands were cold around the controls. The instruments glowed green and steady, pretending the world was still normal. I wanted to radio in a report, but what would I have said? I'm seeing passengers who aren't there? People appear when the lights flicker? They'd ground me, send me to a fit-for-duty exam, and maybe that would have been the right thing, but I kept thinking about the unconscious flight attendant and how the cabin felt heavier now, like the plane carried more bodies than seats. Then, the lights flickered again. I didn't turn around immediately. I watched the mirror. At first, I saw nothing. Then, shapes began to appear one by one. 5, 6, 7, sitting in random seats throughout the cabin. None of them moved, but the positions weren't natural. Heads turned at angles too sharp, limbs resting in ways human joints don't rest, like mannequins or shadows trying to imitate people. The lights steadied again, and the seats were empty, but The plane felt full. I took the controls off autopilot. I needed to focus, needed to keep from thinking about whatever was behind me. But the more I tried to concentrate on the instruments, the more I felt something creeping up the length of the plane. Like when you feel a storm rolling in before it hits. The drop in pressure, the prickle in the air. And that was when the cockpit door handle rattled. Softly at first, then again, more insistent. Something outside the door pressed against it, gently but deliberately, as though testing whether the lock would hold. I pressed my back into the pilot's seat, every muscle tensed. The rattling stopped, then came the sound of breathing, slow, deep breathing from the other side of the door. The lights flickered one last time. When they came back on, the mirror above the door showed the cabin completely full. Every seat, every row filled with silhouettes, not passengers, not living people, shapes, dozens of them, some leaning against the windows, some slumped forward as if sleeping, some turned completely around, staring at the cockpit door. None of them moved, but the air in the cabin thickened like fog, and in the dim reflection, I could see their outlines shifting, not closer, not forward, just realigning, like the cabin had become a living thing rearranging itself. I held the controls and flew through the longest 20 minutes of my life. The breathing never stopped. It grew louder, more layered, more crowded. When the runway lights finally appeared ahead, I lined up the descent with hands that felt numb. The moment the wheels touched the tarmac, every silhouette vanished. The cabin lights steadied, the air cleared, the weight lifted as though something had stepped off the plane mid-rollout. When ground crew boarded, they found the flight attendant conscious but dazed, unable to remember anything past takeoff. None of the passengers reported seeing a thing. They thought the flicker was electrical. They thought everything was normal. I left the airline a month later. I still fly, but only alone. Sometimes, late at night, when the runway lights sweep across the field, I swear I see a second plane landing beside mine. No engines, no crew, just the faint outline of a cabin filled with people who don't belong anywhere on this earth.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.